Hi guys, Andrew Davidson here. Welcome back to another As Per My Ability video. We're doing another top 5 video for you guys today. I'm joined again with Kevin. Hey Kevin.
Hello, hello.
And so the top 5 video that we are going to be presenting to you today is going to be called our top 5 misleading games.
Yeah.
And so what that means is, and Kevin and I have already kind of talked about, going into this video, what we're looking for. So what we mean by misleading games, and again, as always, these are completely subjective. If some of these games will be great, some of them they won't be. We'll talk more about that when we kind of go through the list. But misleading games is I pitched it like this: a game that you can look at, like the box, you could maybe see the components. It looks a certain way, it feels a certain way, but when you play it, it's like it's not what it looks like. So if you go into a game having no clue what the game's about, just basically, based off the components, and it's like, man, this game looks like you're going to be just kicking butt and like doing military. I'm just for an example. And then you play it and it's just like a resource management, grow corn and feed your people kind of game. It's like, that's really misleading. And so we had this idea for a couple of weeks now, and we put together a top 5 list. And so we're going to do that for you guys today. As far as how I organized my list, and I'll get to Kevin in a second, I tried my best to do my 5 through 1, as in like 5 is not too terribly misleading and 1 is like incredibly misleading. Like it's completely not what it looks like. Yep. And there's some debate there, because I think a lot of mine are just like, well, even my number 4 is still pretty misleading compared to my number 1. But I tried to just put them in a really spiffy, kind of quick manner, 5 to 1 in regards to how misleading the game looks, like the box versus the actual gameplay. And one more thing before Kevin gets going is these are not necessarily misleading games that are bad. Some might be, some might not be. Yep. Hopefully we can delineate what they are when we get to them. And so we didn't just rule out misleading games that are bad. Some of the games that are on my list were incredibly misleading, but it's like, I love this game. And some of them are like, I'm not a huge fan of this game. And that might factor into the reason that it was so misleading, or it might factor into some other reasons. But we'll talk a lot about it. So Kevin, go ahead and talk about how you put your list together. And
Yep. So I put it together in the same sort of way of like, how misleading do I think this is? So my number 5, I think, will be less misleading. And then my number 1 will be like, I expect something very specific, and I do not get it when I play this game.
Okay. So that's kind of the criteria as far as how we put it together. We're just going to get started in the top 5 list. So Kevin, why don't you go ahead and start off with your top 5, and we'll just kind of ping pong back and forth.
All right. So my number 5 is a game.
I have to stop you for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt. I predict that there will be 1 crossover.
Okay. I have an idea of what it is. All right. So my number 5, I use this kind of for all games of the same ilk. And my number 5, the reason why I think it's misleading is because I think the artwork says to me that it's boring or that it's dry. And I quite enjoy games. I enjoy games of this style. I think that the artwork is doing them a huge disservice. So my number 5 is Castles of Burgundy.
Yes.
And I think I could have put any Euro game in here. What are some other ones? Puerto Rico. Like, you look at the tokens and the chits on the back and the lack of artwork, and you just think to yourself, what are these companies doing? Because Castles of Burgundy is a good game.
Yep.
And it's from a company, and I just wonder, are you not hiring graphic designers or artists to look over this? Because it's like someone took a tan piece of construction paper and pasted on stock artwork on it to make this game. So that's my number 5.
Is that Stefan Feld game?
It is Stefan Feld, and I enjoy most
Yeah.
Stefan Feld games that I have. Played Merlin recently. Really enjoy that one. Played
Right.
Bora Bora recently, and I like most of his games. And like I said, good game. Where is the artwork?
Just looks terrible.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't own Castles of Burgundy. I have played it, I think maybe once or twice back in the day. I do enjoy it, or I remember enjoying it. I probably couldn't sit down and teach it, but I remember it being a good game. Puerto Rico is another one that's just
Yep.
great, super high on BGG and people's lists. That's just like, it looks pretty bad on the table. You know, you're
Yep.
moving cubes,
It,
and it's not thematic because it's like these are workers or these are, you know,
yep.
certain indigenous tribesmen, but what are they? They're black cubes.
Yeah.
Or white cubes or whatever.
Right.
My biggest one to comment, it's not on my list, I'm just kind of riffing off of yours, is this is one that is a real big disappointment to me because I do like it. It's a Uwe Rosenberg game called Agricola. And
Mm-hmm.
it's basically described as, for those of you that don't know, it's been described as farming the board game or
Mm-hmm.
sim farm or whatever. It's a worker placement game. It's a game I really enjoy. Scoring is kind of wonky and can be tough because you get penalized for a lot of stuff if you don't do it, but it's still a fun adventure. It's a fun game. There's some pretty good replayability because of the way that the actions come out from the cards. But the first time I played it, I didn't own it. I played it with some friends that set it up and taught it to me. Within like, I don't even know, within 10 minutes of playing the game, I was like, I like this game. That doesn't
Yeah.
happen a whole lot. Usually I have to
Right.
play the whole game or maybe play it twice, but I was like, this is fun. I'm having a lot of fun playing this. Oh, what can I do? Do I get some sheep? But I got to grow some crops. I've got to feed my people. I can get more people. I should upgrade my house because that'll give me point. Just all this stuff. I was like, oh, but the game looks terrible.
Yep.
I would love to, if I had the resources, time, money, all that stuff, to really bling that game out and probably buy like wooden sheep and wooden this, you know, and actually have like little
Yep.
actual corn and things like that. But right now it's just like cubes, little tokens, stuff like that. So I know it's not on your list or it's not the game we're really talking about, but Agricola is another one that is just like, man, if this
Yep.
game really popped, if the artwork popped, because when you stand up and look at it on the table, it's pretty bland. Like you said, it's kind of a lot of tans, a lot of yellows / oranges, at least for Agricola. Castle Burgundy is more of that kind of brown thing.
So
It
much
just doesn't.
brown.
It just doesn't look like it's a super fun kind of thematic game. And artwork, as most gamers know, really helps with the theme and helps with the immersion.
Yep.
So have you played Agricola? How do you feel?
I,
Are you feeling what I'm feeling with this?
I have not played Agricola
Oh,
yet, but it's the same thing. Castles of Burgundy recently got a reprint. It was the 10th anniversary edition, and they're like,
okay.
this is the deluxe edition, and they took the artwork and added more color to it, which was great. But I'm looking at it on the shelf, and I'm still not like that art though. Yeah, and I don't understand. You are deceiving me because I look at it and I'm like, why would I want to play a game where I'm just pushing discs around and chits? Like it does not look like a great game, and I
Yeah,
think it's doing itself a disservice.
it's the Euro game problem, and
Yep.
I think it's getting better. Castles of
Yep.
Burgundy, for those of you who don't know, is kind of an older game, maybe 10 years old,
Yeah,
about
I
eight
think
years
so.
old.
Yep.
So it's kind of an older game, and I think Euro games are coming around. I think they're
Okay.
starting to kind of like come around and be like, let's hire an artist, let's have our game look like really good. But yeah, back in the like late 2000s, early 2010, with a lot of the Uwe Rosenberg games, like you mentioned, La Havre,
Yep.
not a whole lot of like big theme. It's just like colored cubes and stuff. The mechanisms are great. The scoring is great. The strategic value is great. But that's about all there is to it. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So on to my number 5. So my game takes place within the Lovecraftian, the Cthulhu mythos world or whatever. It is a game by Rob Davio, who is someone that I
Mhm.
somewhat respect just because of the legacy system. For those of you that watch the channel know that I love to talk about legacy games. And Rob Davio is one of the co-designers on this game. So that was a check mark. It's a Cthulhu game or a Lovecraft game, another check mark. But in a sense, the game basically takes a Cthulhu game and tries to make it a somewhat party game and a fun like game that's incredibly difficult, but it gets caught between the realm of like strategy and silliness. And when you think of like Arkham Horror type games or Cthulhu games, you don't really think of silliness. So when you look at the box and when you know a little bit about the mythos and stuff, you feel like this is going to be a great game. It's by Yellow. It's called Mountains of Madness.
Yep.
By Rob Davio. And so as you see, the board looks kind of cool. It's got this mountain that you're kind of climbing up. It's a cooperative game that you work together. You have different characters and people that you can play. But in a sense, you're just sitting down and you flip over a card and you all together have to manage whatever that card says. So if it says it needs 13 value of yellow cards, okay, we all have to play 13 value right on the nose, no more, no less. And that's all well and good. But then as you go, people get what's called madness cards, which are just ridiculous because then it takes this game, Mountains of Madness, is the title, and it adds Quelf to it. You get a card where it's like, I can only talk in rhymes. I sing all the time whenever I rhyme. Or like, I have to turn around and like face the other way, or I can only when I talk I have to shout, or like I can only talk if my hand's raised, or I can only speak to the person on my left or my right. And it's just like, I bought a Cthulhu game. Like I bought Mountains of Madness, and it's just kind of a silly, like somewhat party game with a cooperative feel. It's just totally not what you think it's going to be. By looking at the box. So Rob Davio, check. Cthulhu, check. Mountains of Madness, sorry. So this is one where it's a misleading game that I'm not a fan of. Unlike your Castles of Burgundy.
I have not played this game yet, but I've heard exactly what you're saying is it adds Quelf to a Cthulhu game, and that's basically it. And so yeah, I get it. It's a good pick.
Stand up and turn around 3 times, or like raise your hand and wait till someone calls on you before you can talk. And I've played it twice. The first time it didn't go over very well because basically just of rules stuff, just people learning. And then the second time, I just halfway through the game, I was like, this is not a game for me. I'll probably be getting rid of it somehow, some fashion at some point or whatever. Maybe just someone that would like something a little more silly and doesn't care about the thematic value of like Mountains of Madness, but wants more of a kind of a fun Quelf game. I do like some of the cards. I think they're interesting. I like some of the Madness cards. Some of them are pretty interesting. Like you have to crawl under the table and stuff, but it's so silly that it's like, this is not a party game. It's not marketed as a party game. And Rob Davio, I saw him do an interview about this game, and he had got the idea of having to work with a bunch of designers, and they would meet on something like this, like a Zoom or Skype or whatever, and they would meet, and he would meet with all these designers from all over the world to collaborate on his projects, like legacy projects or whatever game he's working on. And they would all have language barriers. You know, he would deal with a designer from France that his English is really broken, and you know, Rob Davio's French is not so good. But then you have another designer from Germany and he was like, we're all trying to communicate and like get on the same page, but it's hard because of the language barrier, because sometimes they don't know all like the right word to say, or the English is broken. And he was like, what if I implemented that into a game where people are trying to talk to establish one thing that is inherently easy if you're all English speakers or whatever. But then he just started to be like, well, what if one person can't talk, or what if someone has to shout, or what if, and so that's where he got the idea for it. But I think the marketing for it is completely off. And now, if it had been marketed as a different box, like a Time's Up, something like animated and cartoony, like a Quelf type of thing, I probably wouldn't have even bought it. But it's neither here nor there. But at least it would fit. You know, it would be fitting. It wouldn't be so misleading. So my number 5, Mountains of Madness.
Alrighty. Well, my number 4 I'm going to describe this box a little bit and see if you can kind of catch on to what's happening. So you have two faceless silhouette type figures, kind of dressed to the nines. Looks like they're wearing some suits, and you have kind of some evocative colors in the background, like a Starsky and Hutch or a James Bond or kind of a buddy comedy film. And you might get the sense that this game is all about spies and deception and that sort of thing. And then you play it, and it's a pretty easy party game. My pick is Code Names.
Mm.
And I just when I see this one, I think there's going to be a real heavy spy theme on it. That you have to anagram some names, or you have to figure out how to give code words or code names to people,
Right.
and it's just a word game. The spy theming on it, other than it being called Code Names, like it completely goes over my head. It does not stick in the least bit. Now, I know you're not a big fan of this game.
No.
I think this game has a place. I think it's decent to bring out if you have a group of people together who some don't play games and some do. I've had some good luck with it, but I think it's just deceptive. It has nothing to do with spies, and it's just a word game. So that's my number 4.
So is the problem here because, and I'm only asking this because you actually really like the game, is the problem here just the artwork? Like if it would have been a different box, would have been, if it would have marketed more fun, like Just One, you've seen the cover of Just One, like
Yeah.
something like bright and fun or whatever, would that have changed your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would have been like, oh, it's not trying to be something other than what it is. I mean, the box cover, there's a word bubble and it says "top secret word game," and so I'm kind of like, okay, like I'm intrigued, but that doesn't really play out as you're playing the game. Like there's no decoder, there's no like you have to write it out and anagram it. So just I think they are trying to be a spy game, and there's no spying involved.
Yeah, so I guess we're on opposite spectrums here because this is a misleading game that I agree with. We're on the
Yep.
same page there, but it's a game that you like and a game that I don't necessarily care for
Yep.
because of the split between it's a word game, but it's a party game, but it's too
Right.
thinky, and party games aren't supposed to be too thinky. Yeah, all that stuff. And so I agree with you on it. I just don't necessarily care for Code Names too much. Although, yeah, I have been playing the duet version, and so that's piqued my interest enough to at least be like, oh, let's try the 2-player cooperative mode and see how that plays.
Yep.
So cool. My number 4 is a game. It's probably going to make a lot of noise. It's a game by a company that I absolutely adore. There's only a few companies that I adore, and the company is called Blue Orange. I really like Blue Orange as a company. Not all of their games are for me because they do kind of lean towards the lighter side and some more kid kind of games and stuff. So not all their games are for me, but I've got a pretty cool Blue Orange game sticker on my car, and I do like their games. Their productions are always awesome. Photosynthesis, which is not the game that I'm talking about, is a Blue Orange game that's just so beautiful, and it pops and it's 3D. Yes. This is another 3D game, or 3-dimensional pieces, and it's called Vikings on Board. If I can get it all in the shot by Blue Orange. And so Vikings on Board, just by the title, you think Vikings. Just are we playing Vikings? We're going to be combating, or maybe we're going to be taking over villages, or maybe it's a journey game and an adventure game, and we're going to be going out and adventuring new lands. And look at the board. If you can tell, there's these 3-dimensional boats and these ships and the dock and all these different pieces and all that stuff. And it's really just an action selection game. You have all these great, the boats look great. They're 3-dimensional. They like fit together. But in reality, what you're doing, Vikings on Board, is you have a set of actions. Oh gosh, like 1 through 12. Yeah, I'm not going to 1, 2, 3, 10, I think. So you have basically 10 actions that you can do on your turn, and the actions are in sequential order. So it's kind of a variable phase order game, where if you take the number 1 action, it's a very weak ability. But when we flip around the next turn, you get to go first. And so you take the weak abilities, but you get to go first. If you take the number 10 action, you get to do a lot, but you're going to be going last. So it's got that. A lot of games, Citadels and whatnot, does that.
Yep.
But yeah, you just basically just play. I'm going to take this action, and you're trying to basically get these. There's 3 different resources. There's like cotton and wheat, and you're trying to get them on boats. And the thing is, you're trying to have the most control on a boat when it sets sail, because when it sets sail, you get to determine like where it goes. Or if you have if you have the most control of the boat, you get most of the resources. You get first pick of what's on the resources, which is the goal of the game. The goal of the game is to have the most resources. Not all of them the same. I think it's like 1 point, 3 points, 5 points, something like that. And so you're basically just, there's no combat, there's no exploration, there's nothing that feels Vikings at all about the game other than the old-timey boats that you put together.
Yep.
It's about getting resources on boats. It's basically a shipping game, which you don't think of shipping resources and wheat and cotton when you think of Vikings.
There's no pillaging in here.
No. And the gameplay doesn't have any cool card play or any other special abilities or anything. It's essentially you just like, you have, I think, 2 workers, depends on the player count, and you just go, all right, I'm going to do this, and then I've blocked you off from that spot. And then on the next round, you just kind of flip the order. And so then it's like whoever, went first, or whoever's in the first spot gets to go first or whatever. And it's a super simple game. So kudos for Blue Orange for making a really great game. It looks awesome. It looks on the shelf like it would be, oh, Vikings on Board, cool, crazy, 3-dimensional, like cardboard things. But in the end, the gameplay is nothing that has to do with Vikings, nothing that feels like Vikings at all. And so my number 4 is Vikings on Board by Blue Orange.
Even with a Viking game and the lack of Viking stuff, do you enjoy the game?
I do like it. It's not a game that I'm probably going to be trying to lose, unlike my number 5. I will probably want to play it again at some point in the future. It is a pretty easy game. It's geared, like I said, Blue Orange usually gears towards teenagers or kind of a younger audience. They usually don't make super big thematic Euro games or really heavy games. And so there might be a time in my life in the future where I have a crowd of like, hey, this is like a game that pops. It's got 3-dimensional things. Just like Colt Express is another game that's got a 3-dimensional thing to bring kind of kids into it or teenagers to make it look cool. And so I will probably want to play it again at some point, but it's not a game that I plan on having hit the table anytime soon. But I keep it around. So I will be keeping this one around. So I do like the game. It's just not great. Like, it's too simple. It's just a game that looks really, really pretty.
Gotcha. Cool.
So yeah, number 4, Vikings on Board by Blue Orange.
All right. My number 3, I actually won this game. I think it was for playing in a tournament, or it was through Gen Cant and doing some social media stuff. And I won it. And I mean, that's probably going to be more reality this year than ever. So,
Gen Cant.
And yeah, it's actually really cool. They do some online tournaments of app games. They do some different social media stuff, some different challenges. It's cool. So this game is a game by Renegade Game Studios.
Oh, okay.
And this game is called Gunkimono. And so when you look at the cover of this game, you think, man, this is a Japanese war-themed game. You can see the generals there on the looking at the map, and you think it's going to be tactical and rich and warlike, and that is not the game at all. This game is essentially is you have a grid of different spots, and you are putting out these domino-like pieces that are different colors, and you're trying to create the biggest grid of colors to score different points. It is very light. It is just not at all what I was expecting, and I do enjoy this game. It's a decent game. It's nice and light, but it's almost themeless.
Yeah.
Of the samurai theme has nothing to do with it. This could have been like a farming theme of you're trying to get the biggest crop of corn and wheat and whatever, and so you're placing out tiles to do that. So the theme means nothing, but the game is pretty decent.
Okay.
So
I have not played this game, but I have seen a little bit of like reviews and read about it. And apparently, have you ever played Acquire?
no, I don't think
Okay.
so.
Apparently, it's I've played Acquire
Yep.
once. It's not a game that I own. It was kind of a pretty big seminal game back in the I want to say 60s or something like that. That
Yeah.
kind of overtook Monopoly.
Yep.
And it has the same structure of like abstract strategy
Yep.
of trying to link things together and have kind of like a puzzle sort
Yep.
of thing. And so a lot of people say it's like, well, it's kind of like Acquire.
Huh.
And so that's about all I really know because I haven't played that actual game, but I have played Acquire. And so, yeah, that's really about all I have to say.
Yeah. So that's my number 3.
So the thinking, the theming again, and I'm going to probably ask this question a lot. If it were something else, is there any redeemable way to be like, just like with code names, if they would have given a different theme, a different box, could you have been like, yeah, hell yeah, this makes sense. It is what it looks like what it is, and it is what it looks like.
I think a farming theme would have made more sense, or like maybe a real estate game of where you have the
Acquire.
city and you're trying to connect as many properties or as you can. So yeah, I think it could be redeemed. Now, to be fair, this is a reprint of a game that I cannot remember what it's called right now, and I think that one was some harvest or theme type
Okay.
type of one. So I think they just made a weird decision of like, well, we're going to paste a samurai theme on here. So, but that's Gunky Mono, my number 3.
Okay. And do you like the game despite the?
I enjoy it.
Misleading?
I've played it twice, I think, and the first time we played, I was trying to figure things out, and I think I got it wrong. And then we broke it out again a couple of weeks ago, and I enjoyed it. It was good at 2 players, and so like it's good. It's a little on the lighter end. There's still some decent strategy in there, so I enjoy it. Yeah, for sure.
So it's probably akin to like for me, Vikings on board.
Yep.
Like don't play it a whole lot. Probably not going to get rid of it because I
Right.
might want to play it again at some point, but not
Yep.
really going to hit the table all the time.
Yep. I think that's exactly where it's at for me.
Okay, cool. Haven't played that one, but great. And Acquire, by the way, is a real estate hotels chain game. Okay, yeah. So probably a lot of inspiration from that old classic. I forget the designer's name. Game. So my number, what are we on 3? Is not a game that I own, but I have played quite a few times, and I'm pretty sure Kevin will be able to guess this one. I think you probably own it. I'm pretty sure you own it. So I'm going to be throwing it up on BGG here on the screen. But this game is a game that is going to attract, it's basically a bit like a bait and switch. It's going to attract all the D&D players.
Mm-hmm.
to play a board game.
Yep.
And in a sense, it has nothing to do with D&D. It doesn't play like D&D. It doesn't feel like D&D. It's not necessarily a bad game. There are other games that I enjoy a little bit better. So I'm not necessarily saying it's misleading and bad, but man, is this misleading. Kevin, do you own this game? You know what I'm talking about?
So I have a guess. I'm thinking role player. Maybe.
It's called Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah, that was my second guess on this one. Mm-hmm.
So as you can see from the cover, as I said, okay, so let's start at the beginning. Lords of Waterdeep is based in the D&D world, whatever world. I don't play a whole lot of D&D or any D&D. Waterdeep apparently is a place within the world. As you look at the cover, it looks it looks like D&D. Essentially, it's just a worker placement game where you place a worker, you collect cubes, you try to satisfy like hidden objectives that you have for extra points to score at the end. You can build some buildings within the town so that other people can use those actions. It doesn't feel like D&D. It doesn't play like it's a D&D. It just is a worker placement game with like a D&D theme like pasted on. So like you said with the last game, like it could have been farming, which would have been Agricola, or it could have been any other type of theme, but they pulled the old like bait and switch and said, "Hey, here's a D&D game." It's not. It's just a worker placement game that does not feel anything like Dungeons and Dragons. I have played it quite a few times. I don't own it. 7.8 stars, whatever rating is probably where I would put it at, somewhere in there. Just because the game is incredibly misleading doesn't mean that I think it's a bad, like broken game at all, but it is what it is.
This is a really fantastic choice for this list, and if I would have thought about it, I would have probably put that on this list too, because nothing that you do in that game makes me think, oh,
D&D.
we're going on a quest, we're in a D&D campaign, and it's supposed to, because like it has cubes in it, and it's supposed to be like, well, these are wizards and thieves and paladins, and you're just like, no, it's white cubes and black cubes and orange cubes, and I totally agree with you. I don't own this one, and it's for the exact same reason of like, there are great worker placement games out there, but there are ones that connect much better with a theme. And I would rather play Champions of Midgard, which is a Viking worker placement game, because I feel more connected to the theme than I do with Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah, and in Champions of Midgard does have a combat aspect of like building a ship and taking a ship across the seas and fighting a monster, or things like that. There is that aspect. In this one, there's no sense of adventure. There's no sense of. They even have quest cards. That's what they're called.
Yep.
But they don't feel anything like quests. They're just objectives. And so, let me ask you a question. I'm curious. You have played this game, yes?
Yes.
Lords of Waterdeep.
Yep.
Do you refer to the cubes by their color or by their thematic name?
Most of the time by color.
Exactly. Because it's like paladins and wizards and this are knights, and it's like purple, white, and black, or whatever they are. It's just like black cubes. Okay, for me to get this objective, I need, let's see, discard 3 purple cubes, 2 white cubes, and it's just like you just stop with the terminology, because it's so much easier to just say like white, black, red, all that, instead of like paladins and knights and whatnot. It becomes too convoluted because the theme's not there. In juxtaposition, there's another game in which I dropped the terminology just because, not because it's a bad game. It's a great game. It's one that I love playing. Unfortunately, it's a dead game now. But it's a game called Netrunner. And Netrunner is a card game, 2-player card game, where it is a great game. Everything that works in it is thematic. The gameplay that works is really thematic to the theme. But everything has a term for it. it's not your discard pile, it's your this. It's not your draw pile, it's this. It's not your hand, it's called this. And that's another game where it's like, I get that they're trying to serve the theme, but the terminology of everything in the game, I just stop when I teach and I just say it's your hand, it's your deck, it's your discard pile or whatever. In this game, Lords of Waterdeep, I simply drop it, not because of the complexity in trying to teach the game. I drop it because it's just too dang stupid. It just feels, doesn't it? It just feels kind of stupid.
Yeah, it seems like those cubes that they're really trying to pace on. And Lords of Waterdeep is fine. Like if someone brings it to the table and they're like, "Hey, I would really like to play it," I'll be like, "Okay." It's not a game that I need or want to own because I do not feel a connection with the theme. So, yeah.
Quick story about this game. Recently, well, before the pandemic bubble dropped, because we are filming this in the 2020 Corona pandemic. But right before, like literally right before that kind of dropped and it became a big deal, at least in the Midwest where we live, I was over at a coworker's house, a friend of mine / coworker, and he had some board games. Excuse me. He's not a huge gamer, but he's got a little stack or whatever. Lords of Waterdeep was up there, and I happened to mention, Lords of Waterdeep, and he loves fantasy. He reads a lot of fantasy. He has played D&D in the past. He doesn't currently, just due to time and having family and kids and stuff like that. And I just happened to mention it, and he looked at it and like looked back at me, and he's like, "I've opened it up. I've looked at it. I've never played it." And so I was like, "And why is that?" And this is, if you're watching this, Adam, I apologize, but you did say this, Adam. He's like, and I quote, "I don't do rule books." I'm like, what? He's like, I don't sit and read a rule book. In order for me to play a game, like someone's got to sit down, like what we call kinesthetic learning, of just kind of learn by just playing and adapting and playing the first game and being like, oh, I lost, but you know what? Let's do it again, because now I know what the heck I'm doing. And so he's like, I don't do rule books. And so I was like, okay, well, I can teach it to you. I remember a fair amount, probably about 80% of the rules of how to play. And so we sat down and the story has a payoff. We sat down and set it up, and I was like, I like looked up a couple of little rules. I was like, I'm not quite sure how this starts or how much money, and we got it set up. And I just got about 2 minutes into teaching the game, and his family showed up with all the youngsters and little ones, and he was just like, I don't think we can concentrate right now, because he's got a little like 4-year-old kid that likes to jump on him and play with the pieces and stuff. And so to this day, he still has not learned or played that game, even though we tried. If we would have started like maybe an hour earlier, I would have actually had a recent play of Lords of Waterdeep. But because of that, because of his family showing up, I have not played this game in quite a few years. But I don't do rule books. Not that that's a bad thing, because I don't necessarily really do them either.
I was going to say that is my biggest barrier of games is like, well, I know if I can bring this one, I'm going to have to teach it, and so
I do. This is a total side tangent. I do like read rule books and try to at least flip through and get a sense of them. But if there's a video like how to play, watch it played or something, I'm always going to hit that just to get a more sense, a bigger sense of like how the overall game works. And then if there's like real specific things that come up, specific scenarios, then I'll like look in the rule book and be like, I'm not sure if you can play 2 tiles on your turn or whatever. So yeah, we're definitely going towards a generation or a society where rule books are important. Don't get me wrong, designers, because there are some really crummy rule books out there. They are important, and I do look at them and I do read them, but man, jump into a video and having someone just like have the whole game laid out and say, here's what you do step by step, and be able to watch. People learn just visually through video so much better, and myself included. My hand is raised, and Kevin's hand would be raised too. And so I don't know why we got off on that, but Lords of Waterdeep, it's such a like, the theme just doesn't connect. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stories behind this game. I almost won this game, which is why I don't have it. I actually was close to winning a free copy of Lords of Waterdeep, but I I graciously bowed out to someone who was new to games and said, "No, just give it to her instead." Just because I know that it would be a game that would be like, cool, game on my shelf. My shelf's getting bigger, but it's not. But it's a game I don't really play. And this other gal had just played it, and she was like, "That was really fun. I liked." So I was like, "Yeah, just give it to her." So
cool.
Let's move on.
All right. My number 2 is a game that I'm almost certain you have not played. And it is a game where you look at it and you think, oh, that's cute. That's fun. And you have to realize it really is not. And the game is called Root.
Yes. Have not played. Yep.
Oh, you have played it?
No, I have not. No.
Oh, you have not.
Played it.
So Root has all of these animal factions. I've got a couple of different boxes because I've got expansions here. And so you might look at it and be like, oh, maybe like your animal adventurers traveling through the woods or something like that. But you have to realize it's a war game. And it is heavy on tactics and strategy.
Oh, really?
If you play as one of the factions in the base set, it's called the Woodland Alliance. Woodland Alliance they are insurgent terrorists. And even one of their special abilities is called guerrilla warfare. If you are playing as one of the expansion factions called the River Folk, you're war profiteers. And so while everyone else is fighting, you're just like, well, hey, I can ferry you across the river if you pay me, or like, yeah, I'll sacrifice some of my guys so that you can have some mercenaries to win this battle. And it's so very good. But I think it keeps a lot of people that like war games, that like tactical games, like that. I think it completely they're not interested at all because of the cute artwork on it. So
now, you love this game, right?
I do. I really like this game. When I first got it a couple of years ago, the same group that I played Arkham Horror with, we probably played 5 or 6 games right away. And I like playing with the different factions and trying to figure out the different challenges. I just got the newest expansion, which is the crows and the moles. I have not played with the crows yet, but the moles are like spies, and they're developing networks of tunnels so you can get to different clearings faster. So I enjoy this game a ton. Hard to get to the table because it is hugely asymmetric. So each faction plays completely differently. So one faction is playing a programming game where they are putting cards into this, and then they have to execute that program. And if they don't, they are going to lose a ton of points. One starts with no pieces on the board, and they are trying to spread sympathy and cause a revolt in certain areas. So it's challenging, but it's a game that I very much enjoy.
I actually looked into buying this game after you had. I think I spotted it when you brought it to one of the my gaming events, and we ended up not playing it. But I pointed it out and was like, "Oh, you have this." Root did get some buzz, right? It got some buzz. Like people were talking about it. They were saying how great it is and stuff. I knew nothing about it. I didn't know how it played. I didn't know the theme. Apparently, it's animals, like cutesy creatures and stuff. I had no clue. And it was one of those games where it's like, I want to buy it simply on the buzz. Or I should say the hype would probably be a better word. But I want to try it first.
Yeah.
I just want to give it a try.
Yeah.
And I have not. I've not played it. I have not given it a try. And so it comes down to either just blind buying a game, which I try to keep to a minimal.
Yep.
Not saying it's never happened, Mom, but I usually try to, like, if I'm going to order a game, like through Amazon or Cool Stuff or whatever, I try to have a really good sense of it. Either I've played it or I've watched a bunch of reviews and or watched a how to play video and go, you know what? I think this game is for me. I like the way it looks. I like the way that it plays. I haven't done that with all the games. Some of them have just been like, that's a Star Wars game. Cool, I'm buying it. I have no clue how it plays.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are, I would say, surprises. For example, Star Wars Outer Rim would be a surprise. Bought that just totally like, I got some spending money and I like Star Wars stuff. So bought it. That game I enjoy. And then there's some other ones that I've bought that I'm just like, like there's a game called, who's it by? Who does Machikoro? Is it like Pandasaurus?
Pandasaurus.
They have another game called Dia Monsters that I
okay.
bought that I was just like, yeah, I had no clue what it was, but essentially it's just a rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, but like in a card game or whatever. I ended up getting rid of that one. And so going back to Root anyways, I have not played it simply just because like I'd like to try it, or I'd like to just hear more about it or watch more about it. And so that's a pretty good pick.
So hopefully when we can actually get out of our houses, maybe we find a weekend to play together. It would take a little more of our time, probably closer to the 1.5 to 2 hour range. But yeah, I would teach it for sure. So.
And so you mentioned in your little kind of monologue that this one is a hard one to get to the table. Why is that? Is it because it's so misleading, or does it have to do with the complexity?
So it has to do with the asymmetry of it.
Right.
Because if we're in a 4-player game, I have to teach 4 different games to people, and I have to also make sure that other people know, hey, this is what this other faction is doing, and you might want to stop them. One of the factions is a corporation who is just trying to exploit the woodland, and they're building sawmills and trying to build buildings as much as possible. So you have to know, hey, you need to battle them to get them out of this clearing, to cut off their supply line so they can't get wood to their sawmills. If I'm playing, if someone is playing as a Woodland Alliance and they are spreading sympathy throughout, you have to say, okay, push back against them. Don't give them any room to build sympathy. So that's why it's tough. And then the time frame is a little longer than people are like, yeah, I'm super into this. So time and asymmetry. So.
Yeah, so it's just a big teaching burden, really.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, there's games like that. I'm gonna game drop just because I do want our channel to just expose people to at least names of games, even if we're not talking about it in this video. But there's a game called Captain Sonar, not Sonar, but Captain Sonar, where each person has an individual role, and it's like, it's such a teaching burden because it's like I have to teach every single role and and what you do to that person, and everyone's got questions, which is fine, but it's just it's such a teaching burden. To do. Another one is Great Western Trail, which is a game that I love, but it's got so many working mechanisms. You got your deck builder, you've got your engine building with your train and stuff like that. And so I'd probably would maybe put Groot. I just said Groot. Root into
that's the Marvel reprint of that game, so we'll see what happens.
So the Marvel theme of Root is called Groot. Yeah. So my number 2 is actually, to be honest with you, put number 2 for a reason, because we can probably talk about it back to back. So I won't say a whole lot about it. But this is a game I absolutely enjoy so much. I hated it at first. It took me about a year to come around, and now I own everything for it because it's just so great. It's called Scythe by Stonemaier Games.
Yep.
As you can tell, the artwork looks cool. You've got some mechs in the background. You've got some workers, and look at this looks like there's a civil war going on. And let's see, do I have this? Yeah, you can see the mechs of different colors, and the board is actually a huge board, and you can even buy a bigger board, which I have. And all the factions have 2 different parts, because normally you just pick one faction, but here you pick your faction, and then you pick your faction's kind of ability, like whether if you're more patriotic or whether if you're more industrial. And all of the people have animal companions that come around with them. There's a dude with a tiger, and there's a chick with a bird, and it's just like, let's blow some stuff up. Scythe is a tile exploration resource management game.
Yes.
There's combat in the game that's pretty on the back end. It borrows a lot from the Dune system, from the old Dune 1979 or 80 Dune game, where it's essentially you just reveal numbers, and like whoever's higher wins the combat. And so I'm oversimplifying it, but that's essentially the combat. It's way on the back end of the game. Essentially what you're doing in the game is you are engine building, and you're getting resources to get more workers, so that your workers can spread out. Your mechs can pick up your workers to take them across some rivers, and then they can start doing their thing over there and harvesting wood or whatever, so that you can build more mechs. And you can buy some airships. Again, I have everything. You can buy these huge ships that kind of fly around, and they can pick up people, and they can combat if you want. But it's not a combat game at all. It looks great. It won some awards for the artwork. It won some awards just for everything. I don't even pretend like I know. I have my wallpaper on my computer is like all shots from this game. At least at one point it was all Scythe artwork. The artwork is so rich and so thematic looking. And there's an expansion that's like a narrative, like a campaign expansion called The Rise of Fenris, which adds even more components and like more cool cards to it. You can buy a big board. You can play with up to 8 people if you buy the bigger expansion to it. You can just get all this really cool, awesome looking stuff that makes it, hello Adam, but Adam was my coworker, was over at my place a long while back when I just picked it up, and he was looking at Scythe, and he was really impressed. He was like, "This is one we have to try."
Yeah.
He's like, "That's cool. Oh, what are the different factions? Like, I'm paraphrasing. He didn't say like I'm gonna kick butt, but he had that feeling like you can kick butt in this game. This looks cool." Because the mechs look like you're building an army. You're not building an army. You're just building these things that help carry your people around to do more things, to get more wheat and more wood and sheep or whatever. And I had to tell him that. I had to say, like, it's really a very heavy Euro game where it's like the conflict is not super huge on it. I should probably shut up because we're probably going to talk about it on your end in a minute anyway. So my number 2 is I threw the box. I got so upset. Is Scythe. So I do have to say, I know I said at the beginning, this is a very misleading game, but it is awesome. I love this game. This would probably be on my top 5 to 10 favorite games of all time. Like I said, I've dropped everything. I've bought all the expansions. I have everything for this game. It is awesome, but it's very misleading.
Yeah, and you nailed it. Scythe is my number 1 for sure, and it is for all of the reasons you said. You look at the box cover and you see some farmers in front, and then an army on horsebacks, and then these giant mechanical robot things that looks like maybe they're assembled from old farm equipment, and you're just like, yes. And then you see the map on the table, and you see these hexagonal spaces, and you're just like, we about to throw down. And it's going to be just this all out to drag out brawl. We're going to be fighting back and forth, and we have to move our armies into position, and more area means more resources to build an even larger army. And then you play and you realize, oh, combat is not that important in that game. It's more like, hey, just leave my workers alone, so I'm going to put this mech to kind of guard them as they harvest oil and wood and whatever the other resources. Gold in that game, I think.
Iron.
Iron. Okay, thank you. But and so and that is when we were talking about this list, that is the first one I thought of like the artwork is so evocative, and the everything about it looks so good. Like, do yourselves a favor, for all of those watching, just Google Scythe on images and look at some of the artwork for this game. It
Absolutely.
is fantastic. It is just not what I'm expecting at all when I look at this game.
So when are you going to come around to this? When are you going to get on the Scythe class with me?
Probably the next
took me about a year.
a
So
year.
probably a year.
So I mean, let's make a plan to play it again, and we'll see if you can get me to come around on it. So
it is a really fun game. For those of you watching, yeah, do yourself a favor. Look up some Scythe images. Look up a video on YouTube that talks about Scythe. If you like narrative stuff, which I try to focus on our channel, it has a Rise of Fenris, expansion, which once you get Scythe, and if you like it, there's some narrative that you can add on top that adds more pieces that is phenomenal. There's some cool modules that come with that campaign that unlock that are tied to the narrative within the campaign. That's all I'll say, so I won't spoil all the expansion narrative stuff, but I know I try to focus on narratives when I can. So Scythe can be a narrative game. There's that option to buy the Rise of Fenris, and that, again, the cover looks cool. Have you seen the cover of the expansion?
For Rise of Fenris?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it.
I don't have it with me. But yeah.
I think I should tell you this little tidbit. I follow like threads on Board Game Geek of deals for board games when they go on sale, or like if you it'll be like, hey, this game is really cheap on this website or whatever. And I think Scythe dropped to below 50, I think. And I'm just like, that's a really great price for this game. And
Let's
I'm very close to buying it. And I'm like, this is a game that so far I'm just like, it's okay. So, and like I was very close to buying it, but I think I just said no. Like I might wait on it some more. So, but yeah.
So fabulous game. My number 2, Kevin's number 1. Some downsides about the game that I'm going to try to be objective about is the game is a long game. You can play with up to, like I said, 8 players. You can, if you get the bigger board and stuff. You have to buy a little bit of extra. You can play with up to 8 players. That is a long ass game. I've never even I don't think I've played more than a 4-player game. But having all the extra factions is kind of cool because you get like a green faction and purple and white, I think, or whatever. That's probably something on my gamer bucket list, is to do a huge big day of Scythe of like 8 players. I know of some friends that have posted on their Twitter and stuff of them doing a huge 8-player game, and I was just like, I had to work.
Might as well block off 6 hours right now.
So the downside is it takes a long time. Another downside is there is a learning curve. Like with a lot of Euro type games, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to like talk about as far as like, here's what's happening on the main board. This is what this means. And then everyone has, like I said, their own faction, 2 different faction boards. And like, here's what this happens. And there's some asymmetrical stuff to it because, like I said, you get that secondary board and it's like your actions are not tied to my actions. So when I talk about the move bolster action, that's yours is like, well, my move action is tied to a different action, not bolster or something. So it's kind of difficult because players have a hard time following along when you're going through things and stuff. So there's a bit of a learning curve. Having said all of that, you can get some upgraded pieces. You can buy a lot of stuff for it, like I said, and you can really enjoy this game if you can get past the length and the learning curve. I first played Scythe with a couple of friends, a married couple that I know, and I really hated it. I think I've shared this story at some point before, maybe not on this channel. Actually, maybe on my channel. Anywho, I really hated it. It was so slow. It was like, okay, Andrew, your turn. And I was just like, I put my action thing down. I was like, I produce and I get a wood. I'm done. And then they would go back around. Okay, your turn. I was like, okay, I can produce. Oh, now I'll get another wood. And it was just like, this is so slow, and I don't feel like I'm building anything. It's an engine building game. As you do more, you unlock more from your board, akin to Great Western Trail.
Yep.
And so the more cubes that you take off your board means like the more that you can do. So there's an engine building aspect to it. But man, that first game, I was like, this is too slow. I'm not doing anything. Look at all these players. They're moving all their stuff about, and like they're gaining things. They're getting stuff done. They're like passing their postal exams, and like they're doing all these amazing things in their life. And I'm doing nothing. I'm just grabbing like twigs and crap. And it was just like, oh, this game is so slow. I'm not moving fast enough. I was convinced to play a second game at a game shop, and it felt pretty the same. Maybe a little better. But by the time I was achieving, so in order to trigger the game, you have to do, I believe it's 6 stars, so 6 objectives. They give you a list of 10, but you have to pick 6 of those 10. And so by the time I worked up enough resources to do this, to occupy this, to be like, oh, listen up, mother truckers, I just had an objective, and I put my star down. Well, the other guy on his turn was like, that's my 6th objective. The game's over.
Yep.
It's like, what? No, I just got 1 done, and he's got all 6 of his done. Like, and I was just like, this game sucks. And so I continued to hang out with this couple, and they were like, Scythe, let's play Scythe. And I vehemently was like, I'm not playing. I will leave. Well, I don't know if I actually said I will leave, but I was just like, I do not want to play. Let's play something else, please. You guys can play Scythe like on your own gosh darn time. Whatever you do behind closed doors is whatever your own gosh darn business.
Just
but
pull it out that Scythe board.
So for a year, like I said, I just roundly rejected, like, I'm not playing Scythe. And what happened to me was Stonemaier, which is a game company that you and I talk about. We both love their stuff. Stonemaier put out The Rise of Fenris, which is a narrative game. Well, because I focused so much of my life on stories and narrative, I was like, I have to try this, which means I have to buy the base game and learn how to play that and get into it. And so I bought the base game and the Rise of Fenris, the narrative thing, and learned how to play it. Played it a few times with a couple of people, mostly a 2-player game, just so to cut down on time. And I absolutely loved it. I was like, I'm on Amazon. Let's get the upgraded components. Let's get the extra encounters. Let's buy the bigger mat, like the board and stuff. And so for a year, this is a pretty sad story for me, because there was once a point in my life where if you were to talk about Scythe, if you were to bring this game out and we would talk about it, I would just be like, garbage. This game, no way. And now I absolutely like it. It's number 2 because of that. It's so misleading. You just feel like it's going to be so awesome, and then you just gain a wood.
Yep.
Or like, I move my mech. And it just doesn't, And so we've kind of talked about it to death, although I'm going to kind of surmise what Kevin and I are both saying, even though like Kevin's not on board yet. But I think Scythe is a game to check out. If you can get over the 2 prerequisites that I talked about, the length and the complexity, if that sounds like something for you, then Scythe is definitely, for me, a 100% check it out. Pick it up, order it, learn how to play it with your significant other or friend or gaming group or whatever.
Yep.
And that's your job. My job is to convert Kevin, and I will work on that.
I acknowledge that Scythe is a good game.
Thank you.
It is a good game that right now, as of May 2020, I am meh on. And like you said, I'm just like, it's just okay for me. It doesn't be like, oh, this game is great. The last game I played was probably in February, I think. And the same thing happened to me that happened to you, of like, I got 1 objective done, and the other guy got all 6 of his done. And he did it so fast, like we were playing with, it was him and his wife and myself, and she didn't get any objectives done. And like to me, that seems a little broken and frustrating to want to play again. So, but yep,
Well,
check it out for sure.
any more talk about Scythe, and we probably would have to get Stonemeyer involved for a little bit of paid promotion. So that's, I love this game. It doesn't hit the table enough for me. I'm always down to play Scythe as long as I have the time. I have the gumption in me to teach it, because I always have to teach it, and it's kind of a bear to teach. But I'm always down to play Scythe, and so yeah, you should check it out. It's really misleading. Don't think what you think it's going to be.
Yep.
If you just go in, just like a movie, like if you just go in kind of just a blank slate or whatever, tableau ratio, however you say it in Latin, just an open slate, and and I think you'll like it. And so that just leaves me left with my number one. My number one is something that I've been talking about and playing through. I just played through this recently. It is actually a series of games, and so I'm going to be talking about one particular game, or I'm sorry, one particular box that I'm going to be holding up, but I'm really just talking about the whole series of games. I've been talking about on my channel recently. And so when you look at this game and when I hold it up, it was originally produced and designed by Fantasy Flight Games, which is in Minnesota, and they ended up putting out a printing of it. I don't know how well it went or anything like that, but they sold it off to a company called Cosmos, and Cosmos put out their own printing. They tweaked up a few things. They made it an easier variant, and they added some things in. And it ended up getting nominated for the Kinderspiel the year that they put it out. And when you look at the game, you basically go, this is going to be adventure. It's fantasy. It's like going to be so much fun. And it's called The Legends of Andor.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see Cosmos here in the corner. And so when you look at this, I mean, this is Lord of the Rings in a box, right? Hell to the yes. You got magic, you got dwarves. The artwork is great. It doesn't, obviously, it's not coming, none of this really comes through, but like the board is huge. It's a cooperative game. You get to pick your character. You get to pick, your typical fantasy tropes, the magician that's got the magic, the dwarf that it can hit hard, the what would you call it, a human knight warrior that's a little balanced on a little of everything. You've got your archer female or whatever. This is, by all intents and purposes, Lord of the Rings in the box, but it's not. It is nothing close. Nothing close to like an intrepid, adventurous game. It does tell a story, which is, again, why I got into it. It is a trilogy. The box that I held up is the first movie in the set of 3 movies that all kind of blend together. And you can go check out my video on Legends of Andor, where I talk a little bit more about the narrative structure and what it feels like to play like 3 different movies and 3 different boxes. Each legend is a scenario that carries over to the next one. You get to kind of keep your character, and sometimes you get to level up, so to speak. It is a cooperative game. It is incredibly, incredibly difficult. But there is no sense of hack and slash, like fighting. There is combat in the game, and combat is a pretty good part of the game, but it is actually a puzzle. And when I say that, a puzzle of sorts, not a puzzle in the conventional Candy Crush sort of way, but a puzzle because you're essentially managing time. You have so many hours in a day, and so many different actions cost hours. And yes, you can go over those hours, but then you end up exerting yourself and you lose some willpower, which is basically your hit points within the game. And so you're working together to kind of, depending on the scenario, and it's not really to spoil it. It's just that the scenarios are so vastly different. Sometimes it's like castle defense. Sometimes it's like go pick up this person and bring them to this other place and don't let them get killed along the way. Sometimes it's search the board to find a magical item and then bring it back. Like the scenarios are very, very different in their objective, and they're very, very the replayability, because you'll take like a bunch of cards and shuffle them together and like pick one at random, or you'll do a die roll and be like, we got a 3, so then we do whatever 3 is. Whereas if you wanted to set it up again, you would pick you could pick a different card and be like, oh, instead of down here, it's over here, or instead of this big baddie, it's this one or whatever. So the replayability is high. The scale of it is incredibly low. Playing 2 players, you're definitely handicapping yourself. I've played at least 10 games of this and have won 3 times. So that's 3 out of 10 games. And it's essentially, you're sitting with your other players. I played at 2 players, so it's just me and the other player going, okay, if I go here, I could do this, but if that moves that, then this monster is going to move, but they leapfrog each other. That's going to move up our track. You could do this, but you'd have to spend the extra willpower, which I don't have, but you do. If we use this ability, and okay, I'm drawing this out, but you get the idea. It's a puzzle, so to speak. It's the cooperative. It's not really a game where it's like, cool, on my turn. All right, what do I do? Let's bring out that sword and start hacking. Because when you kill monsters, and this is my biggest fault in the game, that you'll find out if you actually purchase it, and I recommend that you do because it is fun despite the difficulty. It's incredibly fun. But every time you kill a monster, so you basically have a narrative track, and so you're going from 1 to 10. And when you get to 10, your game's over. So it's a timer. And so every time you end your day, your track moves. And so then we start a new day. At the end of that day, your track moves. Makes sense. But every time you kill a monster, your track moves. And so by going and killing monsters to save your castle, you're like speeding up the game like crazy. And so you really just get to like, I can go fight. I'm pretty strong. But if I kill that guy, then we're on 8. And then I could kill this other guy, and now we're on 9. And it's like, we're losing time because we need extra rounds to be able to do this to help the witch mate with her potion. And she's not going to have it completed in 4 turns because she's just a lazy-ass witch. And so it really is very thinky. It is not a hack and slash. It is not a dungeon crawl. It is absolutely nothing what the games look like. So there are 3 of them. There's the Legends of Andor, there's Journeys to the North, and then there's the final, I think it's just the final chapter or something like that. And they're basically like a trilogy that all play together. So I recommend you buying the first one. And if you want to keep the story going, buy the second and third one. I highly recommend this game. It is incredibly fun, but it's just not what you think it is. It's absolutely not what you think it is. It is a very slow paced. And when I mean slow is, I mean, it's a thinky. It's, relevant to Pandemic Legacy, where you're just sitting and going, if I take this cube, you could do this, but that's going to change this, but we don't know what this card is going to be because you have like cards that'll flip over, and it has that very, very same. It's incredibly taxing, not taxing, difficult, I should say. It's incredibly difficult to win, and it's very, very thinky. It's not just like, all right, I'm going to roll some dice and kick some butt. It's very, very much a cooperative thinking puzzle type game. So number 1 is the Legends of Andor.
Okay. Do you think that if it would have been closer to like a Legend of Zelda theme, then you would have been like, oh, I get this. I connect with that more?
I don't think so, because I'm not a Legends of Zelda fan. I've never played those games. I know them because they're popular in our cultural zeitgeist, but it's not a theme that I would be like, yeah, heck to the yeah. I think that if the theme were different, I think what the biggest disservice to it is the fantasy theme, because fantasy really comes with like, I'm going to spell cast, we're going to dungeon crawl, there's Descent, there's Gloomhaven, there's, I don't even know, there's so many different, there's even D&D board games that have like the dungeon crawl feel. So I think the biggest disservice that it has is the fact that it's a fantasy game. If it were a different type of game, maybe a more modern game, let's say, I don't know, like a military game or Spies, that would probably help, because then you would think, well, Spies isn't all about adventure and combat. It's more about thinking and being deceitful and kind of plotting out your moves. The fantasy theme is kind of a disservice, because it makes people think like, cool, dungeon crawl, dwarves, like wizards. It's like Lord of the Rings in a box. It's not Lord of the Rings in a box. If you want more, you can check out a video on the channel about Legends of Andor. But
cool.
I highly recommend it. Just like with Scythe, my number 1 and my number 2 are huge, like thumbs up for me, even though I just went, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
Oh, but you know what? it's fun. And
Yeah.
so Legends of Andor is very thinky, it's very puzzly, but it's fun. So
Cool.
any like honorable mentions? I know we kind of talked beforehand. I didn't really put any together off the top of my
Yep.
head just due to some of my work scheduling and stuff like that.
Yep.
But
So I was trying to think about this. I thought about putting Skull King on my list. Skull King is a trick-taking game. And the reason why I think it's misleading is because in the first printing that they did, they used this really realistic pirate sort of artwork. It's almost like still life photos of pirates or parrots or whatever. And so like the deception is like, I don't think this looks very fun. They've changed it to a more cartoony artwork, and so they fixed that in the second printing. But like I played in a tournament because they needed some more people to want to run it, and I actually won, and I got a copy of the game. And I just remember looking at the box and thinking to myself, I'm like, I would never buy this game in a store because of the artwork on it. So that was one that I thought of, and that's the one that comes to mind right away. But
yeah, so going back to your whole concept of like the artwork being a disservice to bringing out how fun the game is and the theme, I would put Terraforming Mars in the
I agree.
that category. I think it was your number 5 where we were talking about like the artwork just like making the game not look cool and not fun. I don't understand, and this is me talking to just you, Kevin, not to our audience. I don't understand how, I mean, okay, I gotta organize my thoughts. How, like, Terraforming Mars has been out for quite a few years now. How has someone not come to Stronghold and been like, let's do a deluxe? Like, let's hire an artist. Let's get a better board. Let's get the cards. Let's get those stupid player mats like the way they need to be. How has that not happened by now? Like, how is that not in the works?
So I don't really have a problem with the artwork in Terraforming Mars. I think they made a decision of like, yeah, we're going to go more realistic, and it's kind of going to look like a book. I do have a problem with the overall production and the components of it. Why? The player boards are awful, and it's almost to the point where it's not functional, because you could be playing a game and someone bumps the table and be like, okay, what was my income level at? Like, how much money am I supposed to get this turn? Did this go from power to heat? And so that bothers me. I don't understand. And for a while, I didn't understand the price point of it either. And I get it. I'm not like in the industry. I don't know what it costs to manufacture, but you're telling me a game with plastic cubes, cardboard tokens, and wafer thin player boards cost twice as much as a game with metal figures or little plastic houses. Like that's ridiculous. So, but I say that, and I enjoy Terraforming Mars quite a bit.
Yeah, I enjoy it too. It's on my top 5 favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
It needs a deluxe. It needs like a second edition. They need to like Mansions of Madness it, go back to the drawing board and be like, here's a deluxe, like second edition. Everything's, I mean, I interviewed the designer. I'm sure you know Jacob Frixilus. I've told you this before. I interviewed him, and they ran out of artwork that they could actually logistically use, that they just started taking pictures of him, and so he's on like a lot of the cards, like him in a lab coat being like scientist man or whatever. He's like he's chubby and bald, and it's like that's the designer, that's Jacob Frixilus, because they couldn't get enough artwork, like cheesy Google images, to be the artwork. So he's just like, yeah, I'm in like 2 or 3 cards that we just needed artwork for. And so that would be another misleading game, I guess.
Yeah. So the thing with that one is like I thought about that, but I don't find it misleading because I think what it says or what it claims is exactly what you're doing. you are trying to terraform Mars, and you're trying to do it in the best way possible. So I don't find like a disconnect between the art or the box cover.
Really?
I just find a disconnect between the components and the production of it. So that's why it wouldn't have made my list or my honorable mentions. So,
well, I'm just throwing it out because we were talking about the discussion of like the art serving the fun part of it, and I don't think the art serves the funness of the game. Although we both have it and we both play it and we both love Terraforming Mars.
Yep.
So some really good picks. Some games maybe to avoid. Some games that you definitely should buy. Should definitely check out.
Yep.
They're misleading, but at least we kind of talk about them in this video, so you kind of know what you're getting into and what you're buying.
Yeah.
So that's going to be pretty much it for the video. Again, thanks Kevin for joining me. We will be doing some more top fives and some videos in the future and getting our podcast going sometime this year. And so yeah, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, you bet. Keep gaming, friends.
Yeah, so once again, I'm Andrew Davidson from As Per My Ability, and thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you all at the next video.